Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Ellie.
And I'm Tara.
And welcome back to another 180 podcast. If you haven't joined us before, make sure to check out all of our social medias to figure out kind of like who we are. You'll be able to find us at 180 Shift on pretty much all platforms, as well as our website, 180shift.org. So welcome. It's exciting to be back.
So
Yes.
prior to our conversation before the show, you're going to school in person, right?
Yes, I'm doing in-person school.
And what's that like?
Interesting.
How so?
Oh.
What kind of essays are they making you write?
Okay, well, for stuff on like English, I'm writing a piece on gender.
And is this kind of against your will? Is this like the part of the curriculum?
No, well, this is what the teacher has told us to write, so
It's your assignment.
yeah, it's my assignment.
Your assignment is to write on gender.
Yes.
Is it just about how people are non-binary and stuff?
No, we're supposed to we've been learning a lot about a lot of the pieces we've been reading. One of them is about Ansel Dua, which is a Chicana feminist who's lesbian, and we had to read that one last week. So it's probably going to be something along those lines.
Why? Why? I don't get it.
I don't understand anything about the college
understand
system. In fact, I'm starting to realize why all of our college graduates are coming out like not at all educated.
And
To the way
super
that they're supposed to
woke.
be. Yes, super woke.
I mean, it's not even funny.
No, it's insane to me, the amount of like leftist people that are in our education system, and it's very rare to find anyone who's just normal, like actually.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen that in some of your classes too.
Yeah, they had me write an essay on a poem called Queer.
Oh, I love that.
I didn't love it. I was not a fan.
You were not a fan?
No.
Why not?
Because
Are you not accepting of other people?
homophobic.
You sound like all my friends. Like, all of my friends are just like, oh, wait. They're like, they say some of the most craziest stuff. They don't actually mean it, but they just say a lot of the craziest.
Okay, I take that back.
Maybe they do mean it. I don't know.
I'm an everyone needs Jesus.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Anyway, we have a great guest.
That was a little random thing today.
You know, a little preamble to everything going on, right?
Yeah.
How's
All the
life,
fun
Jason? This is Jason.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason.
A random intro to our
Ooh.
guest.
Did we play the intro?
Did we play
Oh.
the intro?
What an L. I'm really sorry about that. I forgot to send the link.
Oh,
Intro?
okay.
It's
There's
on the
an
computer,
intro.
too.
It's a new one now.
Oh.
That's all right.
Okay.
You live, you learn. We'll just put
Exactly.
it on. Okay, anyway.
Next time.
I'll do the intro. Welcome back to the 180 Shift Podcast.
Hey.
That was pretty good.
That was good. That was a good intro. Okay. Well, it's going to be your first time trying boba.
It is.
So that's always a fun and exciting thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect, but
Yeah.
here I am.
Just don't swallow the boba.
Choking hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to chew it. So, do that.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see.
Thoughts?
Let him
Tastes like
Take it.
Opinions?
tastes like coffee and milk. Is what it tastes like.
interesting.
Did
There's
you
no
get to the
coffee in that
boba
one.
yet?
There's no coffee in that
I
one.
have one now. Oh, that's really chewy.
It is chewy.
Wow, it's like I'm
It's like a little exercise for your jaws. by
Yeah,
the way.
there you go.
Yeah.
Watch out, TMJ. Here we come.
No. It's like I always chew gum, so it's like another thing for me. It's like
Does your jaw click?
uh-uh.
So that's just me.
Probably just you.
Probably just me. And I had braces. Would you look
had
at
braces? Yeah. I did not have braces.
that? I can't do the retainer, though. No one I know who has had braces actually wears the retainer. Did you have braces, Jason?
I wore a retainer when I was younger, but I never got braces, so
Yeah.
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 They
Okay.
give one to you and you have to like wear it for the rest of your life.
Which
It's
is
crazy.
stupid. You wore the braces, so why don't
I made it
aren't you
about-
free after?
3 months. I kept that retainer.
That's
maybe
good.
maybe like
for you.
3
Yeah.
years.
Okay, thoughts.
on retainers, on retainers and braces and
The boba.
and English essays. A pretty broad range of topics in the first 5 minutes, I must say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now,
It's okay.
Jason, I like your shirt. Can you explain to us why you wore that shirt today?
Well, we're talking about gun control today.
Ooh.
We're talking about the Second Amendment. We're talking about why it's important, why it's a individual God-given right to self-preservation, and the people have the right to keep and bear arms because of that. California has arguably the most or some of the most gun laws on the books, and there's an unrelenting, indefatigable attack on our rights. Every legislative session in California, there are a lot of misconceptions floating around about the Second Amendment as well. So I'm happy to be here and talk about all that.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on. And just to get started, let's go back to when you were younger. Were you raised with, parents who supported guns in the house, had them in the house? Were you raised around them?
Yeah, my parents have always been pro-gun, conservative. Growing up, never really like into the gun culture or anything like that. But really, it started when I got my first gun from my dad. He, bought it, and of course, it's my gun, California, don't worry. And kind of from there, it really piqued my curiosity, and that's where I went. Well, this is an interesting right. This is, I've always been pro-gun. I've always been more inclined to that. So from there, I just started looking into it, doing my own research, reading, a lot of reading,
Right.
Started working at a gun store. And from there, it just kind of went into then meeting candidates, being active there, standing up for the Second Amendment. And I'll tell you, I definitely didn't expect to be here right now, to be honest. So, but
What do you mean?
Well, I didn't expect to be here in like the sense of like I'm actively like defending the Constitution. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to be involved more.
Welcome to California.
and all that,
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a very new experience in that regard, I guess, in the time frame of my personal life. But anyways,
So you've always lived in California?
I've always lived in California.
Now, how long has California been like this?
So, I mean, California's, at least in the modern context of gun control and where we're at, I guess we can start in 1989 with California's assault weapons ban. From there, actually, California was the first state in the union to pass something like that before the federal assault weapons ban of 1994. From there, you had in 1999 the handgun roster, the infamous handgun roster that a lot of gun owners despise, which rightfully so. And then constantly just increasing the amount of overreach, the DROS system, dealer record of sale, ammo background checks, prohibitions on certain firearms, how many you can buy in a day or in a month, waiting periods, things like that. And yeah, it's a lot of government overreach that you can trace, at least in the modern sense, back to late 80s or so.
Yeah. It's definitely very interesting to see how much gun control we have already, and yet we still see people very heavily advocating for even more.
Right.
It seems like at one point, is it going to be enough for them?
It'll never be enough for them because here's the thing. They know that they can, at this point in time, right now, at least where we stand, they can't outright come and take all the guns and go door-to-door knocking and go, give me all your guns. That would cause so much civil unrest. It would be a headache and a massive disaster for them. But if they can slowly but surely subvert the liberty of the right to keep and bear arms, if they can slowly take that away without you really noticing that it's going away, oh, well, we have an assault weapons ban, but we can still own rifles. Oh, there's a handgun roster, but we can still own handguns. Like people start getting complacent. People start getting
Rolling over on...
Yeah, they roll over, and then eventually they go, oh, wait a minute, what did I just lose when
Right.
the boot is on their face
Is that
already?
not what happened with marriage too? Sorry, I kind of threw a curveball at you.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I guess a little tangent here. Then I mean, it's a classic play out of, a Soviet handbook. Really, there's a fantastic interview that I recommend everybody watch in its entirety. Ex-KGB Yuri Bezmenov. He was interviewed in 1984 about the concept of ideological subversion, and you. Basically, just to sum it up, you create problems in the country, you create the unrest, and you swoop in and see yourself as the government, I should say, as the solution to that. And you cause the civil unrest, you destabilize the nation socially, economically, culturally, religiously. And you put it in a state of crisis, and then there's a normalization period to that where everything that's chaotic and everything that is unnatural, that just becomes normal because that's where we've been for the last several decades.
When the dust settles, nobody notices that the floor is higher.
Exactly.
What about background checks in California? What do those look like?
Yeah, so from the beginning of that, California ID. In California, you also need what's called the firearms safety certificate.
Okay.
You take a test. It's once you pass the test, you get the certificate that's good for 5 years that allows you to do the background checks in California. So without that card, you can't do the background checks in California.
And what's in the background checks?
So it's basically you put your name, your address, where were you born, that whole thing. And there's a series of questions. Have you ever been convicted of a felony or violent misdemeanor? Have you been mentally adjudicated as defective? Things like that. Any, my gosh, what am I trying to say? Domestic violence, things like that.
Yeah.
And then from there, you enter the gun information and submit it to the state. And then you have to wait 10 days to get your gun.
And they run a whole check to just make sure you weren't lying?
Yeah, basically. I mean, they go through your background. And then, of course, there's federal paperwork on top of that. So it's not just the state. The federal 4473 form is something else that you fill out.
Wow.
Same stuff, name, address. Are you a criminal? Have you renounced your citizenship? Are you illegally in the country? Things like that.
Can illegals get guns yet, or?
Well, what's funny about that one is a federal district court judge in Illinois had ruled that illegals should be able to carry handguns.
Why?
Really?
Yeah, because the Second Amendment is only convenient for them when it means they're going to get votes. So they're kind of placating to that crowd and kind of, hey, look, illegal patriots, I'm going to defend your gun rights too. And then you even had people on the more conservative side, like libertarians, celebrating that, like, yeah, everyone should have guns, because that's like their whole worldview is like anyone who has pew-pew is friend, and they don't like think of the broader consequences of that. Off topic, but anyways.
It's weird how it's just like the illegal immigrant situation has been like a plot twist to our political, I guess you could call it like binary system.
It's subversive. That's what it is. I mean,
what do you mean by that?
The whole process of it just importing new voters that aren't going to share the same cultural thought processes as the nation once had.
Oh, and we have like a legacy of who was Republican and Democrat in our families, down to like the 60s, probably even before that, when it really became, because I feel like after the civil rights movement, well, who am I kidding though? It's America. It's always been like this, right? Like very just dual systemed, and your family kind of adopts certain political values, and then that's passed on, and then the political parties carry certain policies, although we've seen some of those switch.
Yes, definitely.
But it's like there's a new political party called the Illegal Immigrant Party.
That just so happens to be a branch of the Democrat Party, interestingly enough. Yeah. Wow. How convenient.
Yeah. Well, so we're hearing there is a lot of that goes behind getting a gun. Now,
in general.
Yeah, just in general.
And to, I guess, touch on that, too, for the dealer record of sale system in California, oftentimes what ends up happening to people is false positives. So people who have a clean record and people who have committed no crimes, they're as clean as ever, they'll get denied for no reason because the system is literally just broken. I mean, there's no other way to put it. There's nothing in their background, or there was something from years and years ago that was this tiny little thing that a clerk made a clerical error not closing out the case. And that prevented this person from getting a gun because, oh no, 30 years ago, he accidentally stole a stick of gum at the convenience store. Like, really stupid things like that.
And so have you seen those cases personally?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
really?
People have come in and be like, I don't know what to do. I've done my live scan form to like really check my background. I have nothing. What do I do? And then I go, I wish I could help you. I wish I was at the DOJ to, number one, give them peace of my mind. And number two, fix it for you. I can't. I'm only the dude doing the paperwork at the store.
Right.
So
very interesting. So that's crazy that something so small would impact it on a very huge scale.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell us about your job specifically.
So general sales, doing the paperwork for these background checks. That's just part of the job.
Yeah.
You sell the guns too?
I do sell the guns too. Talk to people about them. A lot of first-time gun owners.
Yeah.
A lot, especially in the last year or so.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that looking?
It's it's looking interesting because on certain days in California, because we can actually see how many transactions go through in the entire state. Sometimes, especially with the October 7th thing that happened last year, there were upwards of 5,000 guns a day in California being purchased.
Really?
And background checks and all that.
Wow.
So there were a lot of new people buying guns.
Let's say on a normal day, how many would normally sales be?
Anywhere between for the entire state of California, I'd probably say anywhere around 1,000 to 2,000.
Okay, so it spiked quite a bit then.
Yeah, I mean, some days are going to be slower than others for the whole state,
obviously.
But right now it's about 1,000 to 2,000 ish.
Okay, so a lot of new gun owners, and so for first-time gun owners, do they have to do like any safety, like learning beforehand, take any classes for safety and stuff like that?
No, just the firearm safety certificate is the main thing for the first timers. They got to pay for the test and take it.
What does the test consist of?
It's honestly just a lot of simple stuff like common sense. Some California gun laws, nothing super crazy to be honest. It's not very often people fail the test, truth be told. But it's still something extra that the government gets their little grimy hands into. That I'm always very skeptical of anything like that because from there, well, right now the test is only $25. Okay. Well, who's to say you can't just price out the test in the future just because you don't want new gun owners? As a matter of fact, that's partially what's happening with ammo background checks right now are only $1. They're raising it to $5 now because they need to fund more gun violence protection research, yada, yada. And, who's to say they're not going to raise it again to $20, $30, $100 because they don't like guns? Background checks are already $37. An 11% excise tax on the firearms industry went into effect in July. That's already outpricing people of their rights. So again, kind of back to what I was saying about you don't even have to take the guns. You just price people out. That's another way to subvert it.
So just trying to make it less desirable to want to do that because
impossible.
Course, well, you see today's the whole entire world, people can barely buy groceries, and so when you're pricing things up like that, people are going to probably think twice about wanting to go ahead and buy a gun because guns are already, they're a few $100s, for some good ones, So
I wish that were so in California. I mean, a lot of states will have a Glock, for example, for only $400. Here in California, we got them for $600 plus the taxes. You have the 11%, then sales tax wherever you live, then the background check fee. So then Glocks end up being almost $800 in California, which...
I know.
It's a Glock. Come on.
I've seen the prices and it's kind of sad. I'm just like looking there and I'm like, okay.
Speaking of that, what's the comfort level of your usual customer? Like, are they nervous buying a gun or are they just moving here and freshly and like, I got to get a gun as soon as possible?
Gosh, it really depends. I mean, all walks of life. even Democrats. Those are always interesting conversations.
Do they talk about politics to you?
Not all the time, but some people you can really tell that they when I start explaining to them gun laws, they're like, oh, like what? Really? Is that what we do here? Like,
Really?
It's like, oh, you figuring it out now? No, but yeah, a lot of people from all walks of life.
Do you ever get a story of like, this is why I'm buying a gun?
Oh, all the time.
Okay, like what's an example?
Crime. Number one reason. My apartment building gets broken into. My car got stolen. I'm afraid for my family. A plethora of reasons.
Yeah.
But the most common ones are, someone broke into my apartment complex, or there was a murder down the street, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because crime's on the rise.
Yeah, we're seeing so much of that go on the rise. I mean, there's so many, there's like gang members everywhere, and then you're seeing just regular people who are just no good having, okay, this actually tackles, I guess we could go into another separate issue in this one, and like how criminals have guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that people will say that's a reason why we shouldn't have guns, right?
Yeah,
and,
the old tried and true talking point for them.
Right. So I kind of want to know, like, what's your defense or argument against that?
So criminals, no matter what, and we hear this constantly, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. Criminals will never follow gun laws. Okay,
Right.
That's just what it is. Any sort of gun law or any sort of restriction is only there to restrict the law-abiding citizen that wants nothing more than to protect their families, their community, their property, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, California has a 10-round limit on magazines. You can't have anything higher than 10 rounds. Legally speaking. So, but criminals all the time, you have these Glocks and other guns, 30, 40 round magazines that they get to use. They buy them on the black market, or, they get them outsourced through their gangs or whatever like that. And the most frustrating part about it is we, at least from what I understand, a lot of police departments know where these criminals are anyways. They know what's going on with them. Just go get them. They're causing crimes, they're causing havoc, and we need to hold criminals responsible instead of actually restraining and restricting gun owners, because gun owners themselves aren't the ones going out and committing crimes. Because the biggest thing, concealed carry, it's a huge debate in the whole country, actually. A lot of proponents of gun control will say, well, the more people that carry, the less safe we are because there's more guns. Looking at it statistically in California, you're talking about something like less than 10% or something of people who actually conceal carry commit the crimes. And besides that, the people who are carrying illegally anyways are gangsters and criminals that shouldn't have a gun anyways. They have a long rap sheet. I guess my whole point of this is just hold criminals accountable.
Right.
They cause havoc, they cause terror, and the people should have the right to defend themselves from these things, and
Now,
they need the tools necessary.
What about people who are, they have a child who's not mentally well, and we've seen this where, law-abiding citizens will have their child commit the crime, right? They get a hold of their gun. In those cases, do you think that it is okay to then have some restrictions on gun owners, or I don't know, what's your take on that?
So this is then going off to safe storage laws. A little bit of background on that. In 2008, the landmark decision from the Supreme Court, District of Columbia v. Heller, the District of Columbia, they banned handguns for the most part, and you had to keep your guns locked away, inoperable in your safe, and that's your safe storage. The Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional in the broader scheme of the opinion from the Supreme Court, and at large, the safe storage laws do nothing but harm, again, innocent people. They got to go into their safe and grab their gun and load it, and the bad guy's already in your room, and God forbid anything happens. But for mentally ill people, they need to be checked out. They need to be checked out. You need to get to the issue early. You need to get to that. If you know you got a child that's, not doing so hot, you should put it away for a while. Just put it away and figure out what's wrong with your kid, because that's where a lot of this ends up starting.
Right.
However, that doesn't mean I endorse these safe storage laws either. It's an individual responsibility to handle your family, because it's raising the child, it's making sure their mental health and well-being is secure first. So, if you have to, when they're home, if you have to lock it away, then you have to lock it away. But the laws for safe storage requirements and saying you have to keep your gun locked away permanently forever, no matter who's in the house, no matter what's going on, that's where this leads to.
Right.
That's where it all leads to. It's the pulling on the heartstrings of people that will otherwise be like, oh yeah, this is such a good idea because there's so many mentally ill people out there. But then is
there another solution out there for like a home with an unwell child?
Get them help. That's the solution. Get them help. I mean, the solution is never taking away the guns. The solution is never imposing these extra restrictions. It's get your child help. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting. Yeah, I've heard the argument, so I was definitely very curious to hear what you had to say for that.
And sometimes too, it's good if you have family close by. Maybe sending your child to like a relative or something if they're really struggling. Maybe sometimes it's their school environment, they're getting tortured, or
and
like their home life is horrible.
Yeah.
That actually leads into another point where some children who are either getting bullied at school or kind of the outcasts at school will cause school shootings, right? And of course, when the parent doesn't have a correctly safely kept firearm, they then use that to commit the crimes, right? Now, obviously, that's another thing that people use to pull on the heartstrings of individuals, saying, well, I don't, how would you feel if your child went to school and you can never feel completely comfortable because they're in harm, But
I also feel like some of the same kids who are like, suicidal, like I feel like they also just, the fact that, they're thinking about doing something like that to themselves, they would do it to someone else. It's like a similar type of person, I think, And so, but it is a rising problem. Like, why do you think that is?
We need to get, honestly, children off of social media. We need to get children off of, quite honestly, pharmaceuticals, too. I mean, Make America Healthy Again is a real thing, to be honest. I mean, we
feels like a pipe dream.
It kind of does, but it's the reality. I mean, we're a very sick nation in many, many ways. I mean, the things we consume, not only eating, but the media. Children are being exposed to obscene material at even younger ages. It's ridiculous. And it kind of paints this unrealistic and demented, perverted viewpoint of the world that ends up twisting people's minds, and because kids' minds are so malleable and the neuroplasticity of a child's brain, they're making those neural pathways and connections so quickly, it can be a problem. And that's where you got to be a parent. You have to be a parent. You got to watch your children, what they're doing on the internet, not immediately just diagnose them with ADHD and then, oh, here you go, kid, here's some feel-good pills, and that'll solve everything.
Right.
And also alternative schooling. Sometimes the traditional school environment gets too wrapped around the core curriculum, But it's like not every child is we're not, you can't like shove a child into a mold that doesn't fit their brain, So it's important to catch things early on. If you notice that your child is in public school and just generally like having a terrible time, looking like they're depressed or developing severe anxiety or hatred, just kind of the hatred and the triggers that develop, maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's time to maybe try a Christian school, or if you can't do that, do like a Christian co-op, maybe move a little far away from the town that they're in. You never know. Sometimes kids don't open up. They could be bullied. They could be having something in their life that's extremely traumatic and they just can't tell you about it,
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
that's
think
where the parent relationship with the child is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to cultivate that at such an early age, and really tell your child, we are going to trust each other because we're family, and
Right.
and you're gonna, you tell me everything, and
I'm going to listen to you.
Exactly. And that's where you have now the mainly the left basically lobbying for a nanny state. We will take your kids. We know what's best for them. They can, we know exactly how to treat them, and everything is on this spectrum, and you can do whatever you want. And it's just not realistic. It's not sustainable either.
Yeah. I want to know your response to somebody who says, like, well, we hear people saying, well, you're heartless because what about the children?
Yeah, what about the children? I agree. I think it's sickening. It's disgusting that we have these shootings so frequently in this country. Nobody wants to see this. Nobody does.
Yeah.
And the fact that people on the left want to parade this talking point, like for some reason we want to see a bunch of dead people because guns are everywhere.
We don't want to see it. We don't want to go through it. We don't want anybody to go through that.
Any of this. It's disgusting. This should never happen.
Yes.
And it just all goes back again to where we are, just as a decaying culture right now. There's nothing no one has anything in common anymore. There's no set of values for a lot of people to come together and share. And it's the children, like I said before, children are being exposed to things at earlier and earlier ages. Their minds are being manipulated with social media and all this stuff. And there need to be some extra watchful eyes from the parents on their children and what they're doing, for sure. Because if we keep going the way we're going, it's going to get worse. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, how many young men buy? Because I see there's an age restriction here. So can you break that down for us?
So California, generally got to be 21 to buy a handgun or a long gun. I say generally because when you are under the age of 21, you're 18, 19, or 20, and you have a hunting license, you can get shotguns and bolt-action rifles for hunting. But yeah, and this goes back again to another debate on the age thing for California. They don't believe 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are generally responsible enough to have a firearm, but on the same hand, they'll say you can go to war and die for us. So that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And then along with that, the statistics are becoming more and more skewed when it comes to children deaths of mass shootings, because you hear this new talking point now that guns are the number one killer of children in America. Not true. Not true. Because what they've done is they've started to include 18 and 19-year-olds into those statistics. They started including young adults in those because of a lot of these inner city shootings and these adolescents that are in their early adulthood, because a lot of the times a handful of them end up dying at a time. As messed up as that is to say, it's just the reality of a lot of those inner city shootings. But they include that into those statistics, and it makes it look a lot worse than it actually is, because when you remove all that, it's way down for children actually dying to homicide by firearm, or infanticide, or however you want to class it.
Yeah.
But
Would you say it's a lot of gang violence?
A lot of gang violence and a lot of underreporting too. They'll say that crime is down because of the wonderful job that the Biden-Harris administration is doing, and Gavin Newsom is so tough on gun laws. And people are also underreporting these things, because what's the point in reporting crimes? What's the point in going to the police if I can't defend myself, if I can't do anything to protect my family?
So what's the reality?
The reality of the situation is that most of these, like Giffords, Everytown, Moms Demand Action, anything that they say, don't believe them. Don't
How
believe,
come?
because they have this very specific narrative of wanting to push the notion of gun control through, oh, well, don't you know that guns, again, like I said, they're the highest killer of kids now? And it's like, no, they're not.
But what's the truth?
Well, the truth is it's not as much as people think it is. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's way lower than people think. I mean...
But what's like the positive about guns and the right to bear arms?
Oh, well, if we're going to go for that way, then switching gears, the truth of the matter is the right to keep and bear arms is 100% an individual right that needs to be protected. Because when you have a armed population that is well trained, that's what well regulated in the amendment means. It's not government regulation. When you have a well trained population at arms with arms, they can protect their families, they can protect their communities, they can protect their state, whatever it is, a lot more efficiently. And it should be encouraged that people go out and get training and go out to buy firearms to, even prevent things like this and not get in trouble.
Use them responsibly.
Use them responsibly in that way, because that's another reason.
And what's the reality of the Biden-Harris administration when it comes to guns?
I think it's very worth mentioning right now, especially with Harris being the Democrat nominee right now. She, no matter what she tries to say about her position on guns and I own a Glock and all this, she's very anti-gun. She despises it. Back in 2008 with the DC v. Heller decision, she ended up filing an amicus brief against the Second Amendment, saying how it's not an individual right and how the government needs to control the people's right to keep and bear arms. And it shouldn't be a private citizen's right. So there's that. Kamala Harris is also pretty much responsible for the decade of time where new handguns in California weren't even allowed to be sold here as well. With the provision of the handgun roster that I mentioned earlier, she pushed along this technology called microstamping, which on the firing pin of the gun, there's supposed to be this little stamp with gun information and serial number that punches on the case of the cartridge before it goes out to help identify the gun and help identify where it came from in the shooting and whatever. It's an impossible technology. It's only been tried in very controlled lab settings, and it's just not a plausible technology. So what she ended up doing was lying and saying, yes, it is. Of course it is. We should have these things on new handguns in California. So in 2013, that's exactly what happened. When she was Attorney General, she pushed that through, and no new handguns came to California in a decade.
Wow. And
the microstamping provision was recently just removed in 2023. So you actually see a lot of these new guns to California that the whole country has been having forever. SIG P365s and Springfield Hellcats and things like that. The only provision, however, are the loaded chamber indicator and the magazine disconnects, which for those of you who don't know, loaded chamber indicator is this little flag thing that pops up on the chamber to let you know when there's one in the chamber. And the magazine disconnect is when there's no magazine in the gun, you can't pull the trigger. These are safety requirements for the firearms in order to be sold in California, which doesn't make the guns any more or less safe. They're still the guns. They still fire ammunition. You can very easily remove magazine disconnects and loaded chamber indicators. And even if microstamping was a thing, criminals would just shave off the stamping on the firing pin, go get a new firing pin. So none of this works. None of this works at all. And so just in case anyone thought that Kamala Harris magically now is pro-gun because she has a Glock and Tim Walz can't reload a shotgun, she's not a proponent of the Second Amendment. She hates it. Of course, President or Resident Biden, he basically, with being Obama's partner in crime, when Obama tried to ban lead ammunition on hunting grounds and relegate shotguns to 28 gauge or 410. So he was there every step of the way. Biden, when he was a senator, endorsed the assault weapons ban that was federally imposed, signed by Clinton in 94. These people are not pro-gun. These people do not think the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right, which there is historical precedent that it is. And about Biden and Harris on guns.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about maybe something more local as well.
Sure.
So you've had quite a few of, or quite a little bit of experience with the mayor of Burbank, right? Nick Schultz. And you were at the, is it city council meeting, right?
That's right.
Talking about the Second Amendment. So what was happening there?
So earlier this year, the city of Burbank ended up passing a ordinance that basically changes the city's zoning code for firearms and ammunition retailers, and basically cornering them to pretty much just 1% of the parcels in Burbank. For zoning. So no more commercial area, nothing like that. They are shoved in the industrial zone next to the airport, and they can't be within 1,000 feet away from each other or sensitive places.
Sensitive places?
Like schools and parks and government buildings and, nonsense that they say to, restrict your access to firearms further. So that's the main gist of it. My whole point was, actually part of what I said earlier about, if these people can just subvert the liberty without outright taking your guns, they don't have to do Lexington and Concord Part 2. They can just slowly but surely take it away until you realize it's not there anymore.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening. And the Burbank City Council is also doing basically buyouts, and they're really, really inexpensive buyouts, all things considered, comparing it to what happened in Culver City. But $150,000 to buy out gun stores and to eliminate them.
That's taxpayer funds?
I would assume so. I would assume so.
Yeah, because the government really doesn't have money.
No, they don't.
No.
I mean, 2 stores have already accepted it.
Okay.
They want nothing more than to just get rid of gun stores in Burbank, and that's not a conspiracy or anything. They've literally said that they'd like to get rid of the amount of gun stores. They want to prevent the clustering of gun stores in the city of Burbank, because Burbank used to be actually a pretty red city, all things considered, 30 or so years ago. There were shooting clubs at the local high schools and competitions, and it was pretty friendly. But this is what happens when you elect Democrats. So it's kind of an interesting, more contemporary example of what happens when you let that happen.
Right.
So yeah, it's anti-liberty. It's anti-constitution. I mean, these public officials take an oath of office to protect and uphold the Constitution, and they don't, because it's inconvenient to them. And it's only convenient to them when they want to interpret the meaning of the Second Amendment and the militia and the right of the people into something that it's not.
Right.
So
it's so interesting when I see people try to interpret, the Second Amendment, and then it literally tells you, like, how do you... The language in there is very specific, right? You cannot infringe on this, and yet they'll try to every single which way to switch the wording around, but it's right there. It's clear as day.
Well, even more specific is the right of the people to keep and bear arms,
right?
Because during the founding, there were very many revisions of how the Second Amendment should be. Many founding fathers. It was actually a much longer original first draft of the Second Amendment, talking about how the basically the whole right of the people to keep and bear arms. That was at the beginning. So it was the right of the people to keep and bear arms in the militia. Composed of the body of the people. Shall not be infringed, and it talks about being religiously scrupulous as well. That ended up getting removed, the religious part of it, because of, what just recently, and I say recently, but the last 100 years of Protestants versus Catholics in England, going back to the English Bill of Rights. Basically, a lot of what our founding fathers were very inspired by was English common law, William Blackstone, John Locke, the English Bill of Rights of 1689.
Yeah.
However, what's different about it is with the English Bill of Rights, it talks about how Protestants can be armed suitable to their needs and by law. So when it talks about the right of the people and we talk about that individual right, the religious aspects of the original drafts of the Second Amendment were removed, largely in part because it doesn't matter which denomination of Christianity you are, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to keep and bear arms. You are the militia, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And that's where a lot of people also construe English common law, because they'll say, look, only Protestants were able to have guns, so there were restrictions. And the Founding Fathers knew about restrictions, and they wanted restrictions on guns because it was only certain classes of people, because they were inspired by that. No. It's quite obvious that the militia has always been the people. It's always been you, me, and people who can bear arms.
Yeah, there's several other countries who have sort of copied, us, but a major difference, forget which country it was, that like the only difference was that there was no Second Amendment, and that deeply influences like the country and how the citizens are oppressed in a way by their government. But have you
examples.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. I think one of the crazy ones is it Britain, where they're not allowed to, they're not allowed to have guns, and then there's a bunch of stabbings now, right?
And now they're talking about let's get rid of knives too.
Yeah. What are you gonna cut with?
Kitchen knife. Well, what's funny about that actually is with the kitchen knife thing and any knives, you can't carry knives with a point now.
Okay.
So you buy a kitchen knife, and the people at the store are like, go home. Go straight home with this knife. Like, do not carry this on you at all. So again, it's just more government overreach that doesn't work, basically.
Right. I mean, you're seeing, we see what happens in Britain, right? Where they remove the guns because that was such a big issue, right? And then now you're seeing the stabbings, and it's like, oh my goodness, it didn't work. It really didn't.
What's interesting about the UK is at one point in history, like I mentioned, with the English Bill of Rights and English common law, they were a gold standard for people's rights and individual rights, and that's where a lot of inspiration does come from our founding fathers. Various kings and various counties and principalities and whatnot had some sort of right to bear arms for either militia service or, going back to even the 1500s, it was more of a duty for the men of the time to bear arms. And that's where the right sort of evolved. That's where it started getting to. That's a whole other story. There's a fantastic book by Joyce Lee Malcolm, who is a constitutional scholar and historian. She goes into a very in-depth history of how we got here, basically, with the Second Amendment, and why it's in the Constitution, why it's in the Bill of Rights. But yeah, Britain, it shows you what happens over time slowly that, okay, let's start banning guns. Let's start doing registration. Okay, now let's start banning guns. Okay, now we ban guns. Now we have crimes of this kind. So let's start banning this. It's never enough. It's never enough, and nothing's going to work.
I have an example kind of that. So we have a 10-day waiting period for universal background checks, but many argue that background checks and waiting periods prevent impulsive acts of violence. Do you agree with this, and would you advocate it, or would you change it?
No, so it doesn't do anything to help at all. People aren't going to change their minds after 10 days if they're going to do something. And even so, the people who are coming into a gun store to buy a gun legally, they're not going to be the impulsive acts of violence criminals that we see constantly in gangs and things like that. It does nothing but harm people and limit their access to firearms, because a lot of people need the guns now. They need them now. There's crime in their area. Their building was broken into. Their home was broken into. Whatever it is, they need them now. You don't know when the next attack is going to be. And for a lot of people, they'll say, that's paranoid. Why are you so paranoid about all this? You better to have it and not use it than need it when you don't have it.
They've never had a gang member show up to their house in the early morning like I have.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Because you know what? They just think, I don't know what they think anymore.
It's an unfortunate reality. The wait periods, and even more egregiously in California, there used to be a one gun every 30-day law where you can only buy one gun every 30 days. And that recently got taken down, actually, in August of this year. A 3-judge panel that one of the judges was actually an Obama appointee. It was a unanimous decision of the Ninth Circuit panel to say the law should be overturned, largely in part because of fantastic thought processes and thought exercises from the judges as well. Their whole example for that was, well, why do we treat the Second Amendment as this sort of second class right? Like, why do we do this thing where, there has to be these restrictions on people's access to guns? People don't have to wait one every 30 days to buy a new book or to go on Facebook and exercise their right to free speech. People don't have to wait once every 30 days to assemble and peaceably assemble. That's a First Amendment right. Why don't we have that? Because people want to control guns. You control the guns, you can control people's actions that way too. So,
I have another one too, kind of. California's Castle Doctrine provides self-defense rights in the home, but doesn't extend to stand your ground laws seen in other states. How do you view the effectiveness of the Castle Doctrine, and do you think that stand your ground should be an option also for Californians?
You need stand your ground, as far as I'm concerned, because what happens is within the confines of your property and people trying to come and attack you and cause harm to you and your family, a lot of times, if you shoot the person incorrectly, you get in trouble for that. And it's the most backwards thing, because someone's coming to attack you and your family, cause harm to you, and you shoot them in the wrong way. They turned their back for some reason, and you shoot them in the back. Well, you shot them in the back, so that's them retreating. So you can't do that. You go to jail. You get in trouble. So Castle Doctrine's great and all, but you need stand your ground too, because you have your right to self-preservation. You have your right to defend yourself. You also have your right to property. So it's ridiculous, actually.
And the Castle Doctrine is residents can use reasonable force, including lethal force in self-defense, if an intruder unlawfully enters their home. So, okay. No, that's stand your ground. That's stand your ground. Residents can use reasonable force, including lethal force. But can you explain what Castle Doctrine is?
So depending on the barricades of your house, depending on how your house is, like I know, for example, people who have fences or walls or shrubbery in their front yard or something, has to be a certain height limit. So it's an obstruction for them to get through. So if it's not at a certain height limit and they can easily jump over it, well, that didn't deter them, so you can't use Castle Doctrine. It's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Wait, so you can't use it if your fence is too high?
You can if your fence is too. If your fence, I think it's like 6 feet or 7 feet. Like, it's got to be at least a certain height in order for that to stand.
Wow.
If it's too low, or you don't have a fence or anything like that, and someone's like on your property trying to kill you or cause
you made it too easy.
They're out in the open and it's like public or some. They treat it like that. They treat it like that.
Isn't that crazy?
I didn't know about Castle Doctrine.
For example, how disingenuine the law enforcement of these actually is in California. There was a case fairly recently of a guy who pulled into his house, and these guys hopped his fence. They followed him to his front door, and he opened fire because they were going to rob him, cause harm to him, and they opened fire. He hit one of them, but because the guy started running away, they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." And so when the cops came to investigate, and the cop was giving the guy a hard time, the guy was like, "Hey, what's the big deal? I'm defending myself. I have these walls." The cop took his concealed carry license away because he also got chippy with the cop. So it's this really egregious and pretty much a tyrannical system that if you get these people, especially who are in law enforcement, that are not friends of the Second Amendment, you are screwed in California.
Someone like Kamala Harris who doesn't believe in, private ownership of a gun.
Yeah, you're screwed.
But she herself goes, "Oh, I own a Glock because I was a police officer. I was a whatever."
Right. Yeah. And her whole facade on what was it, Oprah, where she talks about, "Oh, someone comes into my house and I'm gonna shoot him." It's like stop playing to people's what they want to hear.
Right.
It just.
She's trying to seem more
stupid.
center than she actually really is.
Yeah.
But after that, she was like, "Oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. My team will fix it."
Oh, because she's so quirky. She says so many out-of-pocket things. She's so relatable. Like, just the fakest campaign I've ever seen in my life.
I know, honestly, I see so many videos where she's like, "Oops, I didn't know we were being recorded right now." I was like,
You're live.
Nice and candid there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, the cannons. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just honestly insane.
I just have one more question. You know, there's been some talk of what's going to happen January 6, 2025. Do you think there's going to be a lot of issues? Do you think that people might even go to the extent of having to, you know, use their, you know, self-defense rights as gun owners?
Let me phrase this so that your channel doesn't get taken down.
Thank you.
If Harris wins, there's going to be a big problem for gun owners.
Right.
If Trump wins, these people will do everything they can to not certify the re-election of Donald Trump. I believe they're going to try to not get him in the White House, even if he wins this election, because of their seething hatred of him and this country, quite frankly. You know, you have one candidate that wants to make America great again, and you have another candidate that honestly couldn't give two flying Fs about this country, and you know, only in it really for their own self-benefit. An unofficially elected candidate to, you know, this is stuff banana republics and dictatorships do, you know, and they try to parade these people as something, oh, this is what saving democracy looks like, by literally subverting the ideas of a republic and democracy and things like that. So as far as people during that time period, I think it's always good to stay vigilant. It's always good to pay attention to what's happening in your neighborhood. Just be mindful.
Yeah.
Just
always
be mindful no matter which way it goes, because you have a lot of paid actors who are very willing to burn down cities again for their own goals. So just be mindful.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions. Now, yeah, so I just want to know, in your opinion, what would some of the risks be if our guns do fully get taken away?
I mean, you're talking about the worst case scenario, honestly, for the country. I mean, it's bad enough we already have media, big tech censorship of the First Amendment. We have state overreach and federal overreach, depending on where you live. Completely taking the guns away. I mean, the country's done at that point. You basically fall into the same trap that Europe is at this point. And that's something that, you know, someone like Trump, even though he hasn't been 100% perfect on the Second Amendment, you know, I think that's clear. But him taking us out of something like the Arms Trade Treaty of the United Nations is something very important as well, because of the UN's want to globalize gun registration and the way guns are treated as well. So, I mean, you're talking about, again, the worst case scenario for the country is that guns are confiscated. You have these buybacks that somehow work, which they'll never work because, again, you look at the histories of gun buybacks in America and North America in general, they just don't work. People will bring in guns that are broken or they don't want anymore just for some quick cash. It's never criminals that come in to get their, you know, here, let me turn in my full auto Glock that I got illegally. Like, no, they're not doing that. And it's a waste of taxpayer money. As a matter of fact, in Canada, they spent millions and millions of dollars I think it was a few years ago or so, on a gun buyback program, and no one showed up. So it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a way to quickly grab guns, and it never works.
I mean, the people who actually do have guns are not going to want to get rid of them.
Right.
They really aren't. It's just not. It's not a thing.
That's why they know if they can keep people with guns for a while. I mean, the United States is ridiculously armed privately. I mean, millions and millions of guns in the possession of people, which is great.
Right.
For the left, they don't have to go and take them all because they know it's, for them, a bit of a pressure release valve. Because they know if we can give you a little bit, not take the whole thing, you know, again, we just whittle it away slowly but surely until it's all of a sudden gone. You indoctrinate the next generation to not think as the founding era generation thought, and you eliminate the thought for guns altogether. because I think it takes a very specific kind of people, a very specific kind of collective thought process of a nation to have the responsibility and have these rights that are what make men free. I mean, that's one of the main things that really separates us from a lot of places around the world where they like being subservient to the government. It's sort of this duty that they have to the government as opposed to, well, hang on a second, maybe the government should have some restrictions on it. Maybe we should keep it in check. And that's what the people are supposed to be there for, to keep it in check.
Yeah.
Anyone who says the Second Amendment's only for hunting or like sporting uses doesn't understand history. Yeah. Quite frankly, it's to protect yourself, protect your nation, overthrow a tyrannical government if you need to, stop foreign invaders.
It's one thing that people get wrong all the time. Even gun-loving people will get it wrong that that the Second Amendment is there to protect yourself from the government. Like, make sure it keeps it in check. And something that I've always heard is that other countries won't want to invade the U.S. because of how armed we are.
It's impossible.
At least not now.
It's impossible for them to at this current moment. That's why it's very important to watch foreign interest and foreign influence in this country. Especially, I know TikTok has been a big conversation for a lot of people, and the Chinese influence of that. The Chinese buying farmland in various states of the United States.
Yeah, also, for example, Los Angeles Times is owned by a Chinese man, right? Yeah. And how they have the China Watch. I remember, I just saw my grandpa reading it the other day.
Tim Walz and his connections to China.
Right, and my grandpa was like, oh yeah, look at how amazing China's doing. And I'm like, that's just plain propaganda. What do you mean?
The only reason why anyone would say that China is specifically doing well is because their version of what their children and their younger generations are seeing are vastly different than what our generation and our children are seeing. Because on their social media, on their TikTok, it's patriotic Chinese videos. It's military videos. It's, you want to be a part of the workforce. You want to contribute to Chinese society. You're going to love your country, and it's going to be for the greater good. Right. Here in America, what do we have? Like,
people
I don't want to say that, but we have people that are different. Let's say people that are
anti-God,
anti-family,
anti-self-love.
That's the most ironic thing. They talk about self-love all the time, and they hate themselves the most. These people,
I know,
because they're not comfortable with themselves. They're not comfortable with the humanity and the body that God gave them, and it's disturbing.
Yeah, it's insane. But so another question that I had was actually, we were talking about this earlier and before we jumped on here about how a lot of gun owners actually aren't voting.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
Gun owners think their voice doesn't matter. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to this sentiment, partially of also like the libertarian thing of, well, just leave me alone. They'll do, don't tread on me. But then when they're being treaded on, they don't do anything because they have like no agency. They just want to be left alone and like be alone to their own devices. That's what it means to them nowadays. So people also don't vote because they feel like they're not heard. They think that because California is so deeply blue, it's not going to matter at all. But less than 20% of the gun owners in California vote.
Wow.
So if people got out to actually vote, people got out to talk to the candidates, talk to these people running for office and see what they actually thought about guns, see what they actually thought about what's going on, and cast a vote for people that are going to defend our rights, things could change. Actually, we could flip a lot of seats. We're not going to flip everything overnight. It's going to take a while to undo a lot of the damage done in California. And it just got to get out there and care, honestly. Yeah. And so a lot of people just don't vote because of that. They don't think they matter. And it's pretty unfortunate.
It is. And, people think, well, I'm not going to be voting for anything, so I can't do any harm. But in reality, not voting is a decision you're making. Right. And it's a decision to allow the people who you definitely wouldn't like to be in office. that's an opportunity for them to slip in.
Yeah.
And so
Isn't it-
people don't understand.
Isn't it weird that you have gun owners not fighting for the right to own
To-
gun? Like they don't want to
yeah.
enter the fight. They don't want to enter the.
Because of how complacent people have become. It's so comfortable to sit and do nothing. It's so comfortable for people to say things.
Stroke your gun.
Yeah, like so many people, and this is, I think, a criticism of the pro-gun crowd too. Shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. Like they go crazy about that part and don't do anything.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wait, slow it down. What was it?
shall not be infringed.
Shall not be infringed.
Right, because of the Second Amendment. Well, yeah, shall not
Yeah.
be infringed. So
Then they don't
that's
vote.
that's all they do. They just say shall not be infringed, shall not be infringed. But then nothing happens because they're like, yeah, leave me alone, leave my guns alone. Why should I be involved? Be involved. I mean, if
Right.
it's something you care about, be involved.
Just fill out a little bubble. It's like
Fill a little bubble.
go to a voter guide that you trust.
And a great
so many
resource.
resources.
Yeah, a great resource is the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Every election cycle, they will send candidate questionnaires to candidates in California. Where do you stand on these issues in California? And they'll grade them.
Really?
Wow. A to F.
Wow.
Wow. So what's it called again?
The California Rifle and Pistol Association.
Okay.
They're also on the front lines constantly suing California for all the unconstitutional gun laws, having some good success for all things considered. They also helped in getting rid of the 1 in 30 law. Firearms Policy Coalition, they're another great organization to look into as well. They're suing nationwide, not just California.
Yeah.
And also voterightla.com is
Okay.
another good resource too.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
So,
Wonderful.
yeah, it's...
There's a lot of resources. There's no excuse.
It really, yeah. I mean, especially you're talking about something that makes the country our country. You're talking about the fundamental right to keep and bear arms that's in the fabric of this nation.
Yeah.
You get rid of the things that made the nation, you don't have a nation. And then import a lot of what they're going to now, I call them illegal patriots because they should be able to vote, right? You import all these people that don't share the same value. They don't share the same sentiment. They don't want to assimilate. They don't want to, even like contribute a lot, to be honest. And they'll just vote Democrat. Vote Democrat because we got you into this country and we'll give you handouts paid for by the American taxpayer. And yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. And that's where it all comes to is getting rid of the things that make America America. You have a lot of these people on the left that will defend other countries and go, well, these countries have their beautiful cultures and their beautiful people, and they should be allowed to have their cultures because all cultures are beautiful and diverse. And it's like, and then Imagine by John Lennon starts playing. But then when it comes to America, they go, no, you can't have that. America must be filled with 20 million illegal immigrants. America must be like this because we don't like racism. But
You're ruining the word diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it should mean something to be an American. It should mean something to be someone that loves this country to the point where it's like, who are the American people for a lot of people? How do you describe our culture? Well, the only thing we have in common is we have nothing in common. That doesn't sound like a country to me. That sounds like a bunch of different interest groups competing and plundering the American tax dollars. That's what I think it is. And if you don't have a people, you don't have that shared collection of morals and values, you don't have a country. You don't. It's sad. But yeah, you see people, Japan is so beautiful and they have their people and it's Japan for the Japanese and it's, it's, China for the Chinese, but it's not American for the Americans for some reason. So
Yeah.
anyways.
Do you have another question?
No, I just, I thought that was great. Yeah, I mean, do you want to do
Yeah, I have
some
one
handles?
more.
Okay, yeah, no.
One more question right here. What are some ways that people can support the Second Amendment and sort of, just tell me what are some ways that people who are wanting to get involved can help bring awareness and support?
Look into Firearms Policy Coalition, California Rifle and Pistol Association, Gun Owners of California. donate, become members, because they're on the front lines defending the right to keep and bear arms constantly. That's one major thing. Paying attention to what's going on locally, too. Because it's not just state and federal governments that are going to try to pass gun laws and gun regulation and things like that. It's your local cities, too, as we talked about with Burbank.
Right.
So another example is what happened in Culver City with a very famous gun store, Martin B. Redding's, that the city overpaid to buy out the gun store, so there wasn't a gun store in Culver City. And it was one of the more popular gun stores in Southern California. So pay attention to what's happening locally, too, and seeing what they're doing. And then, of course, buy a gun.
Yeah.
Be proficient. Train with your gun. So many people will buy a gun, use it once, lock it in a safe for 2 years, and you got to be proficient with your gun. You have to know it. You have to. I don't care if you own 1, 2, 50 guns. Have something. Have something to defend you. That's your prerogative. If you want one gun, cool. If you want 100 guns, great. Whatever you want to do. Just be proficient in marksmanship to a degree. Because it's your right. It's your right to protect yourself. It's your right to keep and bear arms. So buy a gun, support pro-gun groups, elect pro-gun candidates, and elect Donald J. Trump.
There you go. There you have it. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
It's definitely been a great conversation with you. Do you have any social medias you'd like to shout out or anything?
I don't,
Okay.
but please support local gun stores.
Maybe shout out those resources again you had.
California Rifle and Pistol Association, Gun Owners of California, Firearms Policy Coalition, National Association for Gun Rights, Second Amendment Foundation. Not so much the NRA nowadays anymore, but those main ones. And yeah, support all the gun stores, local gun stores, Gun World, Burbank Ammo and Guns, Guns Direct, all these places that, they need to stay. They need to stay. Don't let these anti-American politicians dictate your rights and your liberties. Stand up, fight back, protect the Second Amendment, protect your rights. Your country needs it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
And for being able to talk with us. So it's been great.
Yeah.
Anything else, Tara?
No, just thank you for to everyone who tuned in tonight and who's watching this later. So
Yes. Make sure to check out all of our social medias at 180 Shift, as well as our website at 180shift.org. Thank you. Catch you all later. Bye.